When producing and mixing a song, second-guessing yourself is never ideal. In this video, I'm going to share 8 ways that your ears can get easily tricked in every mix. When you know how these 8 things can get in your way of your creative workflow, you'll be able to save yourself valuable time in those frustrating moments when you feel your mix is working against you. I'm going to cover how unmanaged level differences, subtle pitch issues, and common studio acoustics can greatly impact your critical decision-making process, along with solutions to help mitigate against them. Let's begin with unmanaged level differences. This is a very important thing to watch out for, especially when working with compression. But unmanaged levels within limiters and EQs with extreme curves can also easily fool your ears if you're not careful. Unmanaged level differences are when you dial in processing that changes the gain within the plugin, without compensating or making up the difference afterwards. Now, surely balancing a compressor's output isn't that big of a deal. Well, it is, and here's a few reasons why. Compression, by its very nature, reduces the strongest peaks within audio. That's why we use it. Compression lets us control and get dynamic continuity in things like vocals, bass guitar recordings, drum multi-tracks, pretty much everything. So whatever the track style, compression is inevitably going to lower the overall level of your tracks. And here's where our ears can start to perceive a track differently. Now, the human ear and the way it's wired to our brains typically thinks louder is better. Learning that this is rarely the case takes a lot of discipline. If you manage your levels correctly each and every time you change gain within a plugin, you'll avoid this problem. Really, it's just good housekeeping. Dialing in makeup gain isn't always a perfect science, so don't worry about being too precise. Get your levels matched as closely as possible. At the very least, getting it in the ballpark is much better than not bothering at all. Now, the second reason why it's important to level match is, if you ignore it altogether, you run the risk of unbalancing your entire mix. If you're the type of producer who likes to try out different options throughout your workflow, this can happen several times during your project. Let's say the fader balance you have is set just right and your mix sounds great. But if you throw a bunch of different compressors and EQs over your tracks, all adding and subtracting different amounts of gain, then, you've guessed it, you're going to have to jump back on those faders to get your balance back to how it was. By putting a little bit of effort in every time you set a compressor, and, as I mentioned earlier, with some extreme EQ curves, your ears won't be fooled by level differences and you won't have to waste your time rebalancing. Let's move on to the next way our ears can be tricked in a mix, and that's with your studio's acoustics. Everyone's been there. You mix a song in your studio and it sounds amazing. But when you listen to it in the car or somewhere else around your house, it sounds boomy, muddy, or thin. I'm sure this has been as frustrating for you as it has been for me many times. But don't feel bad, it's not your fault. The acoustics in your studio have sadly been working against you. Every room has some kind of physical property that affects what we hear from our monitors. These are known as room modes. Also known as standing waves, this is a phenomenon that occurs when sound bounces back and forth between walls, floors and ceilings within a room. As a result, these waves interfere with one another, amplifying or cancelling out certain frequencies. These peaks and valleys are what give our monitors an uneven frequency response and can also sound more exaggerated within different areas of your room. The fact is, standing waves affects how you level balance and EQ your tracks. Your room may have a sharp dip around 80 to 100 Hz. This is pretty common, and irritatingly, that's where all the warmth and body of a mix is. Without even realising it, you may be overcompensating for this lack of warmth with, say, an EQ boost across your master, or by setting bassier instruments louder at your faders. The result of this, you get a boomy mix outside of your studio, but a well-balanced one within it. Now, it kind of feels like we're trying to hit a moving target in the dark here. But there are a couple of things that you can try to improve this, such as learning how your monitors sound in your room. But that's not as fun as it sounds and can take a while. Alternatively, you can try improving monitor placement, but this can be a bit hit and miss if you're not quite sure what you're listening for. But there is a quick and easy way to make sure that your mixes sound right and translate better out in the real world, and that's by referencing your project on some high-quality studio headphones. This completely takes your room out of the equation, but there is one more thing to watch out for with this method. All studio headphones have their own sound. Some sound bright and airy, some are overly proud in the low end, while the majority of others sit somewhere in the middle. So how do you know the headphones you're referencing on are going to give you a faithful representation of the tone of your mix? Well, you don't really, unless you use some headphone EQ correction, which we provide in all of our NX Mix Room plugins. Simply insert NX on your master, select the make and model of your headphones from the drop-down menu, and you'll hear the true tonal balance of your mix. Not only does this get around the sonic limitations of your room, but EQ correction also dramatically improves the sonic performance of your favourite headphones. Now, while we're on the topic of headphones, let's talk about the next thing that can trick your ears in a mix. Whoops, my headphones are still on. Now, I get caught out by this one rather a lot. Keeping headphones close by is great for a quick reference, but don't leave them on or turned up when you're not using them. You may not even realise it, but you will hear them along with what you're hearing from your monitors. Live headphones thrown down next to you on the desk bleed a small amount of excited top-end energy into the room, which can influence your perception of the mix. Trust me on this. You'll mix as though your music has a nice sweet top end, then at some point you'll notice that your headphones are still very much on, and you'll turn them off and notice that your mix now sounds slightly duller. So keep on top of it. Let's pick up from an earlier point about mix referencing, but this time it's to do with how you use your room. Acting on too many mix references from around your studio. We just touched on how standing waves present themselves differently in different locations of your studio. And as I said moments ago, checking your mix on headphones, especially with EQ correction, is important. It's also important to hear how your mix sounds away from both your mix sweet spot and your headphones. By stepping away from your desk, you get yet another perspective of how everything's sounding in your project. But try to resist making a bunch of quick changes as you move around your room. As your ears are hearing lots of different perspectives, it's very easy to unbalance your work. Why? Well, our ears don't have any memory. They just listen, and we often respond in real time. When you're standing at the back of your room, in, for instance, an overpowering swamp of low-mid standing waves, it's easy to lose perspective or forget how the nuances in your music sound. You may think that your kick drum sounds too big from the back of the room, so you quickly turn it down to find it now sounds too quiet through headphones or at your mix position. Look, don't worry about the finer details of your mix when you're moving about your studio. Zoom out, listen for how the music makes you feel, listen for the bigger picture. Does everything sound balanced together as you move through your space? If it does, you're doing a good job. Next, let's talk about the Fletcher Munson curve. Working on a mix at loud monitor levels impacts, or I should say impedes, how you perceive the overall tone of your music. Monitor too loud, and without even really knowing it, you'll hear way more bass and top end than your mix is actually delivering. Yes, room acoustics do play a big part in augmenting how we hear music, but with loud monitor levels, it's actually your ears that will be playing a trick on you with this thing called the Fletcher Munson curve. This is a set of graphs showing how sensitive the human ear is to certain frequencies at various sound pressure levels. At lower volume levels, our ears keep a nice balance to all frequencies, from low through to highs. But as the volume goes up, your ears will focus way more than they should on just the highs and the lows, hyping your perception of those critical areas. In essence, the Fletcher Munson curve shows that our ears, and the way that we perceive loudness of different frequencies, ain't in any way linear. So the louder you have your monitors, then you're going to end up having an EQ curve like this in your brain. You wouldn't throw an EQ curve like this across your master just for the fun of it, would you? So don't do it to yourself with loud monitor levels. There are of course going to be times when you want to monitor loud. You may be tracking an instrument, so you want your monitors to feel like a big PA system so that you can really lock into the performance. But when you're mixing, be a bit more sensible with your monitor level. If you're pinned to the back of your chair with your hair blowing in your face, chances are your monitors are way too loud and the Fletcher Munson curve will be there tricking your ears. Not only do moderate monitor levels help you get around the Fletcher Munson curve, they also save you from ear fatigue. Do your ears get tired quickly? Do you even know that your ears are getting tired? Well, let me put it this way. Do you feel like you're making a lot of silly mix mistakes? Or are you having trouble getting that track to sit right? Those are all clear indicators that your ears are getting tired. So take a break. Take care of your ears like you'd take care of any other part of your body. I'm sure we all know what eye strain is like after staring at a screen all day. That's right, our ears also suffer in a similar way to prolonged exposure. But the music we're working on, and our ambition and drive to get those mixes finished, often distracts us from, at the very least, stepping away for 10 minutes to give our ears a chance to rest. So, take regular breaks during your sessions to avoid ear fatigue. One thing will suffer if you don't, and it will be the quality of your music. Now, let's move on to how our ears can be tricked by audio within our DAW, starting with phase cancellations. This is a big topic, and I'm just going to talk about one aspect of it. This way that your ears can be tricked really only applies when working with recorded instruments captured with 2 or more microphones. Say a spaced pair on an acoustic guitar, 2 mics on an amplifier, or multiple mics across a drum kit. Phase cancellations are par of the course here. They occur when 2 or more audio signals arrive at the DAW at slightly different times. These tiny delays between the mics inevitably interfere with the natural tone of the recording, often weakening the body and the impact of the track. Here's an example of 2 mics recording an electric guitar amp. One mic is close to the speaker and another further back. I'll play the close one first and then the one that's set further back second. Notice how they both sound full-bodied in isolation. Now let's blend these 2 microphones together. Listen to how the warmth starts to weaken as I do. This is what a phase cancellation sounds like. Your first instinct may be to correct it with EQ. But why EQ when you can time align this? If you time align, you restore the natural tone, leaving you to be more creative with your EQ curves. You can either slip the delay track forward, so the mic furthest from the mic is in line with the close mic, or use waves in phase to do the job for you. The trick being played on your ears here is thinking that your track needs corrective EQ when really its natural warmth is hiding in plain sight, waiting to be revealed. Now let's talk about tiny pitch issues within polyphonic instruments. Some instruments are prone to having some tuning issues so small it can be difficult to pick up on when listening in isolation. Guitars, for instance, can have slight intonation problems that can cause certain notes to stray out of tune the further up the fingerboard it's played. If that's not the problem, then some players have a tendency to squeeze the strings too hard, again, slightly bending or sharpening the pitch. A guitar that's tuned doesn't always mean that it's perfectly in tune with itself, or tuned well to concert pitch throughout the fingerboard. Same goes for acoustic pianos. Never assume an acoustic instrument is tuned well enough to record. An easy way to check is by playing octaves. If these are closely in tune, you should be good to go. If not, well, then there's not a lot you can really do about tiny pitch issues in polyphonic instruments in the mix. Get it right at source, or your ears can start to play tricks on you when you're mixing the full song. If you assume the guitar is in tune, and it turns out it isn't, you can waste valuable time trying to find what's causing slight clashes in pitch in the full picture of the mix. This distracts your focus away from working on the whole song. Monophonic tracks, such as vocals and basses, are incredibly easy to fix with pitch correction plugins, such as Waves Tune. Polyphonic instruments, such as guitars and pianos, and other keyboard instruments, aren't as easy. Your eyes also play tricks on your ears. Our eyes can fool our ears in a lot of ways. Dancing meters, flashy graphics, number crunching, there's always something in a DAW that's trying to grab our attention. But the most facepalm moment is when you're dialing something into a plugin, and you think you're hearing a change, but the plugin's in bypass. We've all done it, and when it happens, it really should drive home the point that when we're working on music, what we hear is many times more important than what we see. Trust your ears over your eyes. Now, you guys may not be aware of this, but I'm partially sighted. Now, as hard as this is for me to cope with in my everyday life, I know it's my superpower in the studio, as it helps me to focus my ears very easily on the music that I'm working. Years ago, I said something on a podcast that an old colleague thought was quite poignant, and it's this. Maybe we should all be a little bit partially sighted when we mix. Maybe. I hope you guys got something from that. If there are any topics you'd like us to cover in a future video, then please do suggest your ideas in the comments below. Thank you ever so much for watching. I'm Dan from Waves, and I'll see you again soon.